Good, Eric?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello and welcome to our next session. We have another session sponsored or presented by Veronica Santafe, and this is how does tourism affect the food sovereignty of rural destinations? We'll present for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll have room at the end for question and answer. Veronica?
Okay, thanks, Angela. Hello again, everybody. I'm very happy to be part of this event. And to do my presentation, I would like to share my screen. Okay. Okay. So this presentation, this was my doctoral research, which I did at the School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Saskatchewan. And I'm originally from Ecuador, and I did my field work and case study in Ecuador. So the question that is the title for this presentation is, how does tourism affect the food sovereignty of rural destinations? And lessons and reflections from the Chakra Road in Ecuador. So let me tell you briefly about my background. I did my bachelor in tourist management back home in Ecuador. And I decided to study tourism because I come from an indigenous and campesino family in the rural areas of Ecuador. And for us, tourism was that hub that we didn't want to engage in extractive activities in our region, such as mining or oil. Neither we wanted to be part of big agro industry. So we were looking for something that was more sustainable or just, and we have this hub in tourism. And indeed, I did my bachelor, and during my bachelor, there was this belief that tourism could be the perfect tool to alleviate poverty and improve sustainability in our regions. However, doing some research after my bachelor, I got quite sad because I found that in regions where tourism is supposed to be alleviating poverty or helping with improving the quality of life of indigenous and rural communities, actually were also the areas that were suffering from social and ecological conflicts attributed to this industry, such as the Central America, Southeast Asia, and more. So what I found is some of the, I thought that some of the issues were related to how we are measuring the success of tourism in these communities. For instance, when I was doing my bachelor, the two main indicators to assess, I learned that the two main indicators to assess how good a tourism destination was doing was by using how many tourists have visited the region and how much do they spend. But we never saw about what are the other social and ecological impacts that tourist development can have. For instance, water scarcity, waste management, changes in culture and land grabbing and more. So I was thinking that it is important, it will be important to define the goals of what as host we want from tourism. Do we only want to have more tourists and that they spend a lot of money, or is there another way to measure how good tourism does in our community? Also, I found that also indigenous people have played a key role in the development of tourism around the world. Their voices and their knowledge was not included in this development. So I had a question in my mind. So I asked myself before starting this research and these doctoral studies, I say, what is a topic that matters for indigenous people, but at the same time, it is important for the tourism industry? And the answer was food. Why food? Because 1/3 of the tourism spending is devoted to food. And also, I found that in the political and agendas of indigenous and small-scale farmers in rural regions in developing countries, food, specifically food sovereignty, had an important space in their political agendas. So what is food sovereignty? Food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecological sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agricultural systems. So with that in mind, I propose these 3 research questions. The first one was, the goal was to understand what does food sovereignty mean for host communities in the area that I chose as a case study. As I say, this was in Ecuador, in the Amazon region of Ecuador. The second goal was to examine how tourism alters their food sovereignty. In this case, the food sovereignty of Quechua people that were working in the tourism industry. And the third goal was to reflect how this research praxis contributes to increasing indigenous people's agency in tourism research and democratizing knowledge and ways of knowing for food sovereignty efforts. So again, the map, you can see here the map where this research was done. This was done in Ecuador, South America, in the Napo province. Napo is located in the Amazon region of Ecuador. The key features that helped me to identify this province and this destination as an important case study for my research was these ones. First of all, food sovereignty is considered a key principle in the legislation of Ecuador. Plus, there is it's not only recognized in the constitution, but there is also a big legislation that supports food sovereignty in this country. Also, in the Napo province, food sovereignty is promoted through provincial laws. And another feature, indigenous people have been playing a key and leading role in the development of tourism in the region for more than 3 decades. And the tourism, how people are promoting tourism in this region is combining, featuring traditional food systems. They are featuring organic agriculture and also the traditional foods that Quechua people have in the region. And also Quechua people are, they are the ones that live, indigenous people makes the most of the population in this region. So I think these features made it very interesting to study this case. So who participated in this research was mostly in Quechua people, but also we had mestizos. Mestizos are a culture that are a mix of indigenous with Hispanic traditions. And most of the participants were also female, and we had the different types of stakeholders, such as policymakers, academics, entrepreneurs, officers of NGOs, and others. So what I want to show in this table is that this research had a diversity of voices, not only Quechua, but also non-Quechua, but also diversity of roles. So the data collection methods that I used from a Western science perspective was in semi-structured interviews, workshops, observations. I analyzed the menus of restaurants, and I use a reflexive journal as a key tool that helped me to reflect of how my worldviews, how my background could influence the development of this research. So this is a picture of, I am with the green shirt in the middle with my partners or the participants during a workshop. I mentioned that some of the data collection tools that I mentioned before were from a Western perspective, but I also include indigenous knowledge in my research. And here I want to tell you a little bit about the Quechua protocols that were recommended by the elders and that I follow as part of my research. First of all, they mentioned that they want that this research should use food as a teacher, which I mentioned here, food as a mediator. And there was a plant, specifically guayusa, which is considered a sacred plant for Quechuas, that they wanted that Guayusa has to be present all the times, having Guayusa tea during our interviews, during our workshops. So it was a way to honor the traditions that they have. Also, there are this ceremony, which is called Guayusupina. In the picture is me on my knees during this ceremony, that it's like, I will say, it's like getting the ethics approval. In this moment, the elders use plants to help me to clean my mind. They say that this ceremony helps as a person who is not Quechua from the region to open their mind and accept that there is other possible knowledge in the region. Also, the spaces where we develop the research, they recommend that the interviews and workshops should be held in spaces that are important and symbolic for them. For instance, chakras, which are their traditional home gardens, and also in community spaces. Instead of going to offices, to universities, they prefer to have their meetings in their spaces. Also, they recommend that there are some terminologies that they prefer to keep in their original language in Quechua, such as chakra, chicha, maitos, and moro, because they consider that there is not a translation that could explain the whole culture that is embedded in these terms. And this is a picture of me with one of the participants in their one of the spaces that she chose to have the interview. Here's another picture of a workshop that we have, and I on my knees again, recording of the recording of what was being saying during the workshop. So what were the findings? First of all, as I mentioned, the first goal of this research was to understand what does food sovereignty mean for people there. Because in the beginning, I gave a brief or the most generalized definition of food sovereignty. But Quechua people have the opportunity to define by themselves what this looks in their context. And for them, the food sovereignty is embedded in their chakra gardens. What is a chakra garden? Is a traditional agroforestry system that Quechua people have maintained for centuries. This is a space primarily managed by women. They grow their food, their traditional crops here. And this is a space also of learning and a space where they pass their knowledge to the younger generations. And we see here a picture of Quechua women explaining the symbolism of their chakra gardens to a group of tourists that are visiting their chakras. So after understanding that for them, the food sovereignty of them is embedded in their food system known as chakra, we assess how does tourism impact the maintenance of their chakra traditions. So first of all, we found that branding was important when we are assessing how tourism impacts their food sovereignty. Why branding? In this case, at the beginning, this tourism destination used to be called the Chocolate and Cacao Road, which was promoting the agriculture, which was promoting the farming of heirloom organic cacao, which was good for them, was providing a good economic incomes. They were doing organic farming. However, when promoting cacao as the center of the tourism development in the region, it was also promoting that Quechua people were clearing their chakras and growing more cacao. And this was a crop that was grown for sale, and it was taking the space of other crops that were crucial for their food, subsistence. The other aspect when considering how tourism affects the food sovereignty of Quechua people They found that in certain way, when tourism is led by indigenous Quechua women, it supports the gender empowerment and the maintenance of traditional knowledge, which is good for them. The third aspect is that when they are promoting tourism that promotes their food sovereignty, it helps to develop a participatory governance about their food system. They found that there was Quechua and no Quechua people were getting together to talk about how important is to maintain their chakras, how important is to consume the food grown in these chakras, and this was helping to create solidarity between indigenous and non-indigenous people that are local in the region. And also, the tourism development in the region was helping to diversify the local economies because it was helping to open markets, local markets and regional markets for the products that are grown in the chakras. Also was helping to develop a cooperation and solidarity between among businesses, not only among Quechua businesses, but also among Quechua and non-Quechua businesses. The outcomes of this research was that there was a paper published at the Journal of Sustainable Tourism, which you can access. And also I developed several workshops because of COVID. We had to do these workshops online. And I developed several workshops with the support of the Ministry of Tourism in Ecuador to promote the outcomes of this research, to promote some topics related to food sovereignty, topics related to agroecology, and how these topics can get together and support the food sovereignty and the well-being of locals, specifically of Quechua people. And what I have seen in the last 2 years is that after the research, Quechua people got very enthusiastic of these multiple ways that they can use their food traditions to promote their tourism businesses. For instance, they are offering chocolate tourism, they are offering native fish, native fishing tourism, they are improving about the use of how to use seeds from their chakras to make jewelry or to offer what they call art and food. They use seeds and plants from their chakras, and the tourists can paint, can learn how to draw and paint using these seeds. And overall, they are developing innovative menus using this rich agrobiodiversity and that they have in their regions. And that is what I want to tell you, and I will be happy to answer some questions. Thanks, gracias, and in Quechua, yupaychan.
Thank you, Veronica. And question and answer is open now to any of our participants. If there's anything you'd like to speak to Veronica about, you can post it in the Q&A or feel free to chat. No questions yet? That was very interesting that you described your background, Veronica. It helped to explain why you're so invested in this and how you have an interest in it. I thought that was very interesting, and it led to a deeper understanding of the research.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it was very important to position it. What is my background while doing my research is one of the recommendations while doing participatory research, to show how my background can influence. It could be positive, but sometimes it could be also biased when developing research. So I think it's important to always say that.
Very interesting. There is a question here from Ronaldo. Have you compared your results to other places in similar situations around the world?
During the last 2 years, I've been working here in Canada. I'm located in Canada, in the province of Alberta, specifically close to Jasper by the Rocky Mountains. So last year I was working in a project that they were interested in this region that has been, the region that I'm working, they have been very focused in oil and coal industries, and they want to move from that towards more sustainable businesses. And they were interested in this approach of using food sovereignty as a way to assess how an industry, it could be tourism or other industry, can affect the food sovereignty of locals. And what they were interested was in how to facilitate, how to identify what food sovereignty means for locals here. So what I've been doing the last 2 years is promoting my research and showing that food sovereignty can be a tool to assess, to an alternative way to evaluate how an industry affects the well-being of people.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Veronica? We have a few more minutes. Veronica, is there anything you wanted to add before we close out this session?
No, what I found through my research, and I would like to share with this group, is that it is important that we promote the publications of the sharing of our knowledge in other languages other than English. For me, deciding to do my doctoral research in English was something that I thought was very necessary, because pretty much everything published about food tourism, about tourist development, has been published in English, and I wanted to know what was going on. And for this reason, I decided to learn English, because English is not my first language. At the age of 30, I had to go to another country, learn English, and take a postgraduate. And now my goal is to share that knowledge, bring that knowledge back to my home country. And actually, I promote my research mostly in Latin America and in Spanish-speaking countries. But I found that it's a very important need, that it will be interesting if in the world of food tourism, we address this knowledge gap, to share knowledge that is only in English to share in other languages.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of praise for those comments. I think we all agree we need more research in other languages.
Yeah, and it was so bad. I was trying to invite people from my country and other colleagues in Latin America to this event, and the barrier, they say it sounds very interesting, but we don't speak English. So there were a lot of people that they don't speak English, they cannot access to this type of events too. So I'm hoping that in the future we can see more events and knowledge published in other languages other than English.
Oh, and you have one more question about your last one, and we do still have 2 more minutes here. So regarding your previous presentation, food mobility is both a threat and a way to integrate cultures. Do you know other cases, successful ones, of food integration and how to avoid losses in local culture?
Well, I think I've been reading lately. There are more researchers using the concept of food sovereignty, because the term sovereignty means that hosts, the locals, have the sovereignty to decide what is good and what is bad in their food cultures. For instance, in my research, authenticity, locals had a very different perspective of what is authentic of what I thought. So I've seen research like that done here in Canada, specifically when working with First Nations people. They're using the concept of sovereignty to define what is to be shared or not when talking about food systems. And I've seen some interesting cases also that is happening in Brazil with Guarana. I saw a paper in the journal People and Nature of how indigenous people are using the Guarana farming as a way to reivindicate their rights in their land and their sovereignty in their cultures.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for all the questions. I'm having a lot of insights here.
I think that wraps up this session now, and hopefully we'll see everyone in the session number 8. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.